me.
Do you want to look at these? I have a set.
Gotcha. It was me.
Okay.
It was an ID 10th year.
Okay.
Well, outside of form, I mean, is there anything we need to do with these documents?
I think that the main thing that I'm aware of, we just needed to approve the form so we could implement the program. The first one is is the application to be a part of the program. And then the second one's you fill out to be reimbursed for your tuition once you finish the class and you have documentation of the grade you made so we can reimburse you.
Well, I guess if there's a process of applying for it, who's reviewing those documents?
At this time, it was the HR department listed to do that. And it's a first come, first serve. There's nothing to say this department gets over, this department, whatever. It's first come, first serve with the applications and how much money is in the program.
Just one question, KK, on the verbiage on the form.
Okay.
I'm looking at the application
Okay.
up top there.
First one or the second one, Joe?
Let me see, Miles. It would be the second one.
Okay.
Maybe my brain's just not processing it correctly today. Submit completed application along with cover letter, degree sheet, etc. Applications must be submitted by December 31 for classes beginning the following semester. This is a reimbursement.
That is correct. So that needs to be reworded.
That verbiage, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It needs to reflect the correct date because it is for reimbursement.
And then, since you're going to make that correction,
Yes.
would you also consider another one in that somewhere in here, we're making clear that depending upon the grade that they receive, because I don't remember it being a all or nothing. Is that correct?
That is correct.
If you got an A, you got
You get
X
a certain
percent, a
percentage.
B, and then
Yes, sir.
just,
It's ratio for what the grade was.
yeah, somehow, just as a reminder, or even on that application, that first form, just have that language.
Your cover letter and degree sheet, what is a degree sheet to me may mean something entirely different than what it does today. Degree sheet to me back in the day was, here's your 124 hours that you need to check off, and it was just nothing but a checklist. Are you asking for like a transcript?
Transcript. That, to me, that probably should have said transcript
Okay,
instead of
so
degree sheet.
Make
If
that
you
change.
guys are
I
okay
think
with
that
it.
says on the other document as well.
Okay.
It also says degree sheet. I was a little bit.
Yep, I can
thought that's
make
what you
those.
meant, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, it's degree sheet on the other one as well.
Okay.
Okay.
And is that a certified? Because you can get those certified copies.
You can get it certified. The main thing, we just need to verify that they took the class and what grade they made, and that's
Yeah.
what we're doing to do that for. And most of the time, they're gonna have an official transcript, I would
Yep.
think, if they're trying to get reimbursed for it.
I just want to make sure. Yeah. Okay. So with those changes, Joe, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, with the discussed changes, motion to approve the two documents.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Thanks, KK.
Okay.
Since you're up here, September 21 Employee of the Month selection, A, B, C, and D.
Yes, nominees A, nominees B, nominee C, and nominee D, Miles. We need 2 of them picked for September.
I only saw A, B, and C. I came in with the intent to make a motion for candidates A and B, and we'll make a motion to nominate candidates A and B for Employee of the Month of September 2021.
Okay.
I'll second it.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Without objection, we'll go back to item 3, discussion possible action regarding presentation, implementation of House Bill 2311.
Thank you.
While she's pulling that PowerPoint up, just to let you know today's count, we have 40 total. 15 are youthful offenders. 5 of those are assigned to OJA, but they're not considered custody yet. We only have 1 OJA custody that is actually pending placement, and the other 24 are county. Okay.
Hold on, Jamie. With that count, does that include the ones that are in Pawnee?
No. There's 13 in Pawnee.
And that will, in the future, be added to that. Hey, Joe, what was the number on that contract?
50.
So that would be
40
53.
plus 13 is 53. Okay.
That's
Okay.
going to be a point of continued discussion.
Yeah, I think lawyers call that just making records. Thank you, Jamie.
I appreciate the softball.
Run away.
Thanks.
I've presented this, made a few changes, but I presented this to BET, so I apologize for some of the repetitiveness for a couple of you, one in attendance. But it's good practice for me because I'm going to the budget board tomorrow. So in addition to any questions or concerns you have, any feedback would really be welcomed. The first thing I want to explain, you all understand it, but I'm not sure that everyone on the budget board does, that there's actually 3 categories of offenders that we're going to be housing. We have the juvenile delinquent, which that's who we all have always had, and prior to June 19, when we got the first administrative order by Judge Prince to start taking youthful offenders, that's all there was juvenile delinquents. So from June 2019 forward, then we began housing youthful offenders, but only after they were first initially placed in the county jail, and we did an assessment, and the order also allowed us to return them under my authority if they became a security risk or we couldn't manage them. So really, I think we have only returned maybe 5 total in the last 2 years, and that was after multiple assaults on staff or kids, other kids in the facility. So the third category that's coming, as you all well know, will be the murder in the first degree. And those will be 15, 16, and 17-year-olds who are charged with murder, who have been housed in an adult facility. They will now be not only initially placed, but housed in our facility. You all are very familiar with this, so I'm just going to run through it. I already mentioned that we first began taking youthful offenders after assessing them. They were processed first at the county jail in June of 19. All of that has now changed since the Department of Health did their last inspection and revoked the county jail's authority to house juveniles, which of course, as you know, resulted in a contract with Pawnee County for murder 1, because until November 1st, when House Bill 2311 goes into effect, there's still a statute on the books that prohibits murder 1s from being housed in juvenile detention. So when that happened, there were a lot of meetings and discussions about where they would go and how we would handle the youthful offenders, because they had youthful offenders there at the county jail that had been returned or were in the process of being assessed. And now those youthful offenders would be brought directly to juvenile. They would not go through the county at all. So the ones that were there were moved the very next day to our facility. And now if a kid gets picked up on a youthful offender charge, then they're just brought directly to us. They don't go to the county now at all. As far as the murder ones, since they got a contract with Pawnee County and it's only 14 beds, they can only house 1 female and 13 males. Since they got that contract beginning of August, roughly, I think, anyway, since they got that contract, luckily they've stayed at 13. But we had to have some kind of verbal agreement as to what's going to happen if a kid gets picked up midnight on Sunday. Where do they go? So we have an agreement that they will be brought to our facility and put in a holding cell. They will never go inside the facility. They'll just be in the admissions area. And the next day, Judge Elliott and now Judge Allen will be notified, and they will make a determination as to whether or not they will remain in our facility, which I'm assuming they will. There's nowhere else for them to go. So those are the major changes that have occurred, and that brings us to November 1st, when we become the initial placement and the placement for custody for the murder. That law mirrors the Juvenile Justice Reform Act that the feds amended. It's identical to what the federal act is suggesting that states adhere to. The only way that a murder one kid can be put in an adult jail after November 1st will be if the court finds that it's in the interest of justice. And there's 7 factors that they have to weigh out, and they have to have a court hearing with a written finding. And if they do that, they have to have another court hearing at least every 30 days to determine if it's still in the interest of justice. Let's see. So we'll skip to Pawnee County. So Pawnee County, I'm sure you know, has now increased their per diem rate. They started at $45 a day, it's my understanding, providing medical and agreeing to provide education. Now they are $90 a day, and they are requiring the trust provide for medical expenses and an educational program. They're having some issues in Pawnee County. The sheriff says that they've already had $6,000 in damages just in the last month and a half by the Oklahoma County Jail juveniles charged with murder. They're having staff resign, and this isn't funny, but the sheriff said, and others are saying either the kids go or I go. They've had 1 female officer threatened to be taken hostage and raped. They've got a lot of, according to the sheriff, they had quite a few difficulties managing the gang and racial conflicts, and the offenders are starting to create subgroups to gain power and control. And I think the reason that they're having so many issues is they can't separate them. They have 1 pod. They all have to be in that same area. They can't they can't split fall partners, gang fights, or anything. And that is absolutely essential that you be able to separate offenders in order to maintain safety and order. So we have requested we are in the process of requesting resources. When we went to BET, we requested a fingerprint machine and stuff that comes with it, an intake specialist, 15 detention officers, and an additional licensed mental health position. The BET voted to recommend to the budget board approval of the fingerprinting system and of the intake specialist. So the intake specialist, that's a person that's going to be over the fingerprinting, the coordination with the courts on the murder ones, because they'll be handled a little differently with local law enforcement, and just facilitating the whole booking and admissions process. That structure is set up, will mirror the way the county jail has staffed their booking process and admissions process. Let's see. So the licensed mental health. So there's been more than one research study, but one that I'd like to mention that was conducted in 2017, because it had a large sample size, over 14,000 participants. And out of that research, it was found that there is a statistically significant correlation between the length of stay within a correctional facility by adolescents and their adult health outcomes. So the conclusions were that incarcerations of 1 month or more are directly linked to worse adult general health outcomes, and the incarcerations of 1 cumulative year or more are directly linked not only to general health outcomes, but to worsened mental health and functional limitations. Right now, and really since the YOs began to change the whole picture at our facility. But prior to that, ever since the beginning of the juvenile detention facility here in Oklahoma County, it is a temporary holding facility, designed, staffed as a temporary holding facility. So when I say that right now we only have 1 licensed mental health person, they're a family therapist and they're on contract for up to 30 hours per week, that worked pretty well for a temporary holding facility. We do not believe that that's sufficient for long-term offenders. So we're asking for an additional licensed mental health position. Their length of stay is going to be much longer. In FY21, the average length of stay for a juvenile resident not subject to the Youthful Offender Act is 22 days. On September 13th, the average length of stay for offenders in our facility who are subject to the YO Act was 61 and a half days, with 166 days being the longest stay so far. The average length of stay for the people at Pawnee right now facing murder 1 is 164 days, with 300 being the longest. So you go from temporary holding juvenile facility average of 22 days to YOs averaging 165 days to murder 164 right now. But that's only based on when they were admitted. You know, it's not projecting out if they're still there when they're 18, how many days would that be? But they do have 1 person that's been there for 300 days so far. All right. So 15 additional officers. You know, when a person, whether they're 17 or they're 25, is convicted of murder in the first degree, if they're under the age of 18, but they're convicted, they go to a maximum security facility. So if you think about it, I mean, first of all, you're putting youth together, which is like a pure deviancy training. But also, that same person that had the pending murder 1 charge yesterday that was okay to be in our facility today is no longer okay. It's the same kid because they're convicted. And now they're being moved to maximum security. So our staffing for detention officers has been based on an average of about 60, 65 kids tops, where the only separation issue, this is the key, it's not the number of kids we have. Prior to the YOs, the only separation issue was male and female. So could we work with those staffing numbers, cluster them when we needed to, fill up units, close down units? Absolutely. Worked fine. Will we be able to do that now? No. We anticipate with having to separate the murder ones, and often they will occupy 2 pods. Most of the YOs will be separated from juveniles. Sometimes we may have a YO that can either be housed with a juvenile or housed with a murder one, depending on the circumstances. And then you have the juveniles. And then you have quarantine unit, at least one. If you have a female and a male positive, you now have 2 units on quarantine. And you have male and female separation. So the majority of the time, we anticipate having all 7 pods open. That's the need. That's the reason that we're asking for the additional officers. 15 officers is really only 3 additional posts, but it's 15 when you use the federal model that builds in the relief factor for sick and annual training, relief, and days off. I mean, they have to have their days off. So you say, okay, well, that's great. In a perfect world, you'd separate them, but you just might not be able to. So, why separate violent and nonviolent offenders? Why consider their age or their history of criminal activity? So consider this. You have a 14-year-old son. He shoplifts cologne from Macy's because he wants to impress his crush. But he lacks the skills of an experienced criminal, so he gets caught easily. Although maybe a fine and community service would have been appropriate, instead, he's processed as a criminal defendant and placed in our facility. Here, he's going to cross paths daily with violent offenders. And multiple studies have shown that placing nonviolent youth in detention centers with violent youth is going to increase their chances of committing a violent crime later in life. It's like a training ground on how to become a better criminal. So, I ask you this question. Would you want your son or your daughter, 14, 15 years old, who stole a bottle of cologne or took out grandma's car, housed in the same pods where we have either youthful offenders who have done drive-by shootings or we have murder one? The next slide is just to show you visually. I didn't put numbers on it, but I think the visual captures what I'm trying to communicate here, with the green being juvenile, the orange being YO. Hopefully you're not colorblind, and the blue being murder one. But it shows that the average age right now there's not much difference, very little difference. The average stay, as you can see, based on severity of charge, jumps pretty quickly. And the longest stay is the most significant change. So our juveniles right now, the average age is 15.82. And 6 of those are 13 and 14 years old. They've committed or allegedly committed, depending on where they are in the process, crimes like possession of a stolen motor vehicle, grand larceny, destruction of property. Then you jump to your youthful offenders, average age 16 and a half, although 10 of the 14 that we have are 17 years or older. They have done drive-by shootings, murder 2, burglary, arson, and robbery with firearm. As an example, that's not all of the charges. And then, of course, the third category are your persons charged with murder 1, and their average age is 16, but I want to point out that 8 of those 13 people in Pawnee right now are 17 or will be by the end of this calendar year. I'm going to let Hannah come up and talk to you a little bit more about this separation issue, how the staffing of 35 kids versus 60 kids, that's not how we need to be looking at it anymore because of separation. Thank you.
Good morning. A lot of you had questions, especially at BET. They also had questions about, so you had 64 officers this whole time. Why now all of a sudden, when your count is in the 20s and 30s, why do you need 15 more? And that's a valid question. So we wanted to show you guys what we're doing with those 64 officers and how they're plugged in. We have 64 budgeted detention officer positions. So those cover 37 posts. We've got 14 posts on the first shift, 14 on the second shift, and 9 on the third shift. We're able to have less posts on the third shift because the kids are asleep. We're governed by the OJA Administrative Code, which says that we have to have 1 officer for every 7 residents while they're awake and out of their rooms, but we only need 1 officer for every 16 residents when they're asleep. So we're able to get away with having less posts on that overnight shift because the kids aren't up and out. We're mainly doing visual sight checks, making sure that they're still asleep, remaining asleep, and we're not doing as much overnight as we are during the day. So we need more people on the first and second
Do
shift.
you want questions at the end of this or as they come to my?
As you come would be fine.
So I think you said you're working 3 shifts, so that's 3 8s. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
3 8.25s.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you modified the shifts, what are they working at the detention center? Are they
So
working 12s or 10s?
I'm not sure. We actually met with the sheriff's office to go over our staffing plans to see if there was a way we could do like a more platoon based, 12 on, 4 off style, where they work 12-hour shifts. Because we have to have the kids out of their rooms a minimum of 12 hours a day. That doesn't hold for count, doesn't account for hygiene breaks, after class, any of that. We would have to have that higher level of staff more than 12 hours a day. So it would actually cause us to need more staff if we went to that 12-hour shift, because we couldn't have, there wouldn't be a shift where we could have the reduced amount of posts that we need. So separating it into 3 means we have that higher level of posts from 7 in the morning until 11 at night, but we have the lesser amount of posts from 11 to 7. Does that make sense? If we went to a 12-hour shift, like 6 to 6,
So you have kids out of their cells ranging from 7 in the morning till 11 p.m.
the latest is 10. Yes, some of our upward bound kids.
All right.
And then they have to be out a minimum of 12 hours. So if we have to do count, which we have to do multiple times a day, if there's an all available, an issue within one of the day rooms that we have to pull staff due to an emergency or a fight or something like that, all the kids have to go up. So we can't just say from 6 to 6, you guys are going to be out, because there are going to be several times during that they do have to go up for, 15, 20 minutes to do a count, standing count, things like that.
And the sheriff's office, who did you visit with, and they confirmed that you would need this same number if you were doing those
With
longer
Brandon
shifts?
Holmes. Mr. Henley, who's our facility administrator, and I met with Mr. Holmes. We looked at the staffing. We asked specifically, would you agree if we can't change that 12-hour time period, that we would need more staff to go to those 12s? And he said yes. So we, on average, those 64 officers keep 5 day rooms open. And I'm going to show you what that looks like with 2 day rooms closed. Occasionally we can open a 6th day room if it only needs 1 staff, and another one of the 5 day rooms only needs 1. It depends on our post, but I'm going to show you what that looks like. To demonstrate how our staffing applies, there are 3 main categories of detention officer posts that we have. Day room leaders, central control, and then our rovers who do everything else in the facility. Our day room leaders are the detention officers who have our most interactions. So they're the ones in the day rooms with the kids, giving the kids their toothpaste, talking them through the day, taking them to class, doing things like having group discussions. They're also the ones who are doing all of our de-escalation. If 2 kids are getting into it with each other or with someone else, they're the ones talking them down, participating in cell extractions. They're kind of the boots on the ground that have the most interactions with the kids. Central control. We put a picture in here for you guys. Several of you have been here for a tour, but you've seen kind of our control center. It requires us to have 2 officers in there. They do all of the entry and exit doors into the facility. So if people come for a tour, if people are coming to deliver paperwork, all the officers coming in and out, they facilitate all of the entry and exit. They also facilitate all incoming communication. So if there's an officer calling to say, hey, I picked up a kid, we're on our way. A DA's office is calling to schedule visitation with a client. A judge is calling to say, hey, I need a kid for court. They're facilitating all of that external communication. And they're also monitoring the entire day, 24 hours a day, to make sure kids aren't fighting. If a fight breaks out in a day room and the officer is unable to get to the radio, those control operators are responsible for making sure that everyone remains safe and nothing crazy happens without being able to alert the rest of the facility. They also control all of the movement within the facility. No resident leaves the area that they're in, whether they're with a detention officer or not, without control checking the path and approving that they're ready to go. So they control any movement with residents within the facility. Our rovers are who do everything else. If a DO is not assigned in a day room giving a kid his toothpaste, or they're in central control monitoring and assisting with those functions, which there's only 2, they do everything else in the facility, which includes passing meds, the admission and release process, any kind of transporting that we would have to do outside of the facility for medical reasons. We have custody of the kids, just like your kids have to go to the dentist and the doctor and things like that, so do ours. So anytime they go out for a behavioral analysis or a psych evaluation that are court ordered, we're responsible for taking them if they're in our custody. So especially escorting residents to and from court, most of them have court within our facility. So we escort them from the detention facility throughout the courthouse there to go to one of the 6 courtrooms. So we wanted to give you kind of real-time numbers. We can have as many as 13 residents go to court on the same day. We just on August 24th, we had that many. So obviously for a while we were grouping those. We were sending one officer with multiple residents to go to the same courtroom. That can become an issue if one of those residents has a bad court day. If something happens in their court case or determination that upsets them, it's difficult for that officer to handle multiple residents at the same time. It's also difficult if you've got an officer who has my stature, who's 5'3", and they're escorting a resident who's 6'2", 300 pounds. That's going to be difficult for them if they have a hard court day. So the chief judge requested that we make sure we do everything possible to only have a 1-to-1 ratio when we're taking kids to court. So if we have 13, obviously that means we're already strapped and have to plug in administrative staff sometimes to make sure that we accomplish that. So I wanted to show you what an actual day looked like for us. So on July 27th, this is actually where our kids were. I kind of split up the day rooms for you. You'll see on the left-hand side of this page that we have day room A, B, and C. Those are our larger general population units. They hold more beds, 15, 12, and 15. We also have our D commons, or that's the area towards the back of our facility if you've been there for a tour. There are 4 smaller units with a common area in the middle that we house smaller groups of kids. So on this date, we had 40 kids in-house. That required 6 day rooms to be open. Now, typically, we only try and have 5 units open, but luckily, we only had to have 1 staff in day room A, so we were able to open up another unit. So remember, we have to have 1 and 7 for while the kids are out. So we've got to make sure we're keeping 1 officer for every 7 kids. So if day room A went from 6 to 8, we'd have to put two officers in there. So those are the actual day rooms that were open. So on this date, we only have 14 posts during waking hours on first and second shift. So 9 of those officers had to go into the day rooms. There's 1 in A, 2 in B, 1 in D1, 2 in D2, 2 in D3, 1 in D4. 9 officers are in there giving the kids toothpaste, making sure they're not fighting, facilitating group discussions, all those tasks that we talked about. That leaves me 5 officers to do everything else in the facility. 2 of them have to be in central control. That's how we maintain safety, which leaves me 3 to do everything else. Take kids to court, run uniforms back and forth to the kids. If a kid gets upset in class, then they have to be escorted out. It leaves me 3 people to do all the other tasks. And sometimes that could be 13 kids going to court. I've got 3 people to do that if I don't plug in administrative staff. So then we wanted to show you what that looked like versus if we added in the murder 1 kids. So with being that same day, if we add in the murder 1 kids, we've got all 7 units open. One thing that we're having to do now that we weren't having to do a year ago, 2 years ago, is we always have to have at least 1 quarantine unit open. Any juvenile that comes into the facility, they have to remain on quarantine for at least 5 days, and they get tested for COVID before we release them into the general population. Hopefully we don't have a female happen for that, because then we'd have to have 2 quarantine units open, 1 for a female, 1 for males, because we can't house them together. So right now we had 3 positive cases at that point on that day. So we had to keep that quarantine unit open. There's rarely ever a time since we've started COVID that we haven't had to have a quarantine unit open. There's always a juvenile being brought in. Thankfully, we haven't had positives the whole time, but they always have to stay for that 5 days to make sure they're not positive when they go into general population. So if we added those murder 1 kids in, we've had to plug in 12 staff just to give kids their toothpaste, make sure they're not fighting, all the tasks that we talked about for a day room leader. That only leaves me 2 people to work central control, which requires 2 people, and do all of the tasks left in the facility. That's why we've asked for 3 additional posts on each shift, so that we can have those 3 rovers to take kids to court, pass meals, pass meds, make sure a juvenile can meet with their attorney when they come in to facilitate visitation with their families. If we don't have those additional 3 shifts, I have 2 people to run central control, and I have nobody to do anything else. So that's why we're asking for 3 additional posts on each shift. That 3 additional posts, it takes me 5 officers to fill 3 posts, because they've got to have days off. They've got to have holidays, time that they have to get off the books. They've got to be able to take FMLA at some point. We have to work in their time, and we use the federal model for coverage. It takes me 5 officers to cover 3 posts, which is why we're asking for 15. Hopefully I did an okay job at explaining that. We wanted to give you a visual so that you could see real time what we're doing with those 64 officers that we're budgeted for. The cost of that, we broke down the cost for you. For 10 months, September through June, it would cost $46,000 and change for each detention officer. I know that we're asking for 15, and I know that that's a lot. I know that's a shocking price tag at the bottom of there, but that's what it's going to cost when the kids come.
Okay. I'm terrible at this kind of thing. So looking at your slide, number 27, the first shift you have 14 people.
Yes.
Okay. And that accomplishes everything they need to, you're able to accomplish everything you need to do during the day. That's get them to school, get them to lunch and back, have time out of their cell.
Correct.
Et cetera.
Yes, sir.
Then you have 14 people on that second shift. And that is from what time to when?
3 p.m. to 11 p.m. That's where they do all of their showers. They do any kind of program activity. They still have a meal on that shift. Anything that's not like right now they're in school, they pretty much only do school and court. We also have quite a bit of court in that afternoon section. We have dockets at 3 o'clock, dockets at 4 o'clock, dockets at 4:30.
Okay. And then the third shift, the 9 folks there.
Yes, sir.
They're basically monitoring.
Absolutely.
So again, to my earlier question, if you went to 2 12s, you couldn't accomplish that same, the staffing ratio of your 2 various times is 14. So if you have people working 7 a.m. to 7 p. and 7 p. to 7 a, it would appear that you could accomplish the same task that you're currently doing.
Well, that would mean all the kids would have to go up in their room at 7 p. and not come out until 7 a. And if we do any kind of count, if there's an all available, if we have to put the kids up so they can have a hygiene break, we've broken the administrative code that we've agreed to, that they be out of their cells for 12 hours.
You're able to accomplish having people out of their cells with 14 people per shift, right from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. is what you told me.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So if you work a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., you have the same 14. You work 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., you have 14. So from that 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., why aren't you able to accomplish what you're accomplishing from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.? Because
they've got to have days off. There wouldn't be a full 14 people for each of those schedules.
Well-
It's kind of hard to explain verbally. I'm sorry.
Right,
I'm
but
probably not
currently-
doing a good job.
Currently, staff has to have days off, so you have
Correct.
flex factor built in today, which would be true under that same metrics.
Correct. So they would actually have to be here more than 12 hours. I couldn't reduce the number of staff that I have from 7P to 7A. I couldn't only run 9 posts from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
And then, who wants to talk about the mental health position? Is this would be a county employee?
Yes.
So Joe, just so you get some sort of BET background,
Mhm. I'm not
one
on
person
BET.
is on contract, 30 hours a week,
Right.
doctor. I looked at, or I asked them to look at either getting another individual on contract for something similar, or expanding the contract hours with a partner or something of the sort there within that same unit or firm or business or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Obviously, if we're not paying benefits on somebody like that, it would be less expensive for us and probably better outlined if we did it in a contract and knew exactly what we were getting and what was expected of the individual, in my opinion. One of the things that since you brought the mental health thing up, that I wasn't aware of last time or didn't pay attention or catch or whatever, is that you have 2 full-time positions that are not licensed who assist with the general youth guidance needs. Are those DOs? Are those the ones that are responding to de-escalation? I kind of hijacked you. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Go right ahead.
What are those individuals doing?
Those individuals they're youth guidance specialists.
Okay.
It's a position, it's not a DO position. Often they are detention officers who have been promoted because they're really good with the kids. So they're doing, like, they talk to them about, like, if they have a grievance. They work with them in basketball. They do recreation. They do program schedules. They do some de-escalation that can be handled with just, come with me, let's go have a talk. You need to cool down. But they're not licensed therapists.
Is there something? So I'm still jacking your.
That's all
time
right.
there. Is there something that requires us to legally have X amount of hours or X amount of therapists? Or I understand what the outcome and the importance of having the mental health professional there is, but help me get to that. What is our goal? Is our goal having 2 licensed therapists and 60 hours a week, or is it 2 licensed therapists and 40 hours a week? What's our target here?
Well, our target was to have one full-time that was the same person that dealt with the kids. They knew the kids. They got relationships where the kids have a consistent person there. And then we could do a contract for supplemental like we're doing now for up to 30 hours a week.
And I still think that. So in this state, we have this thing called the Oklahoma Standard. We love to talk about it and talk about how great it is. We also have a huge burgeoning group of individuals that are working towards criminal justice reform and diversion hubs and all sorts of counseling and mental health and so on and so forth. Have we reached out to that community to find out if there's anybody within that community that we could plug into our facility and provide those through outside funding that's not coming from the county or the state?
Through grant funding? Would that be the outside funding that you're talking about?
Grants, donations. I mean, a lot of times lawyers call it pro bono work. Doctors do similar. They write it off on their taxes. They donate it. And I understand the importance of having the one constant, that constant face, that constant point of contact. I get that. But if we're able to get that one constant from a diversion hub, from a, I don't even know what all the groups are. Joe, you're probably more familiar with all the groups. I mean, even if we were working with the University of Oklahoma, bringing some of their mental health students down on a regular basis that are interested in juvenile mental health, this might be the perfect place for them to come do their practicums and stuff. And I don't know that, I mean, do we have students that are coming in to do practicums?
We do have one right now who just started.
Started for whom? For the contract psychiatrist, or started for the
Yeah,
county?
she's working under the family therapist license to come in and do 2 or 3 hours a week under him. We're not paying her.
So that model that Miles is talking about, where we might be able to utilize University of Oklahoma or some other program, would work under the contract model.
I can certainly explore that, yes.
Okay. I have a question more along the lines of liability.
Okay.
Is the county not better served by contracting this out to licensed healthcare professionals as opposed to having that person on staff ourselves? I don't know. The reason I'm asking is I don't know the answer. And has that been something that you all have contemplated asking or checking on before advocating for this position?
I don't know if the county is more liable because they contracted with somebody or they had them on payroll. I really can't answer that question. We're happy to explore your suggestions. That's one of the things that's very helpful about presenting this to you. I think those are all good ideas. I don't have the answers to those right now, but I will certainly look into those resources. Either way, unless I get somebody to do it for free, I'm going to have money, whether it's a position or it's money for a contract.
Yeah, I don't think you're hearing us say that we or the budget board wouldn't recommend Monday. I think what we're saying is we'd like a little more information before we have to make a determination. If we can do so through a contract, that might be more advantageous to us for a number of reasons. Number one, Miles mentioned we're not paying benefits, et cetera. The liability question, I think, that needs to be touched on. I mean, obviously anybody can sue for anything, but
Yeah. Okay.
Or let's assume that today is the date that you need, that you're getting all the juveniles. You're getting all 13 of them. You're telling me you have a staff shortage. What's the bare minimum that you need right now to make that work? Or can you make it work without them?
I don't believe I can make it work without the detention officers.
Okay.
Just like what we showed you. I mean, with 7 pods, what I would have to do, if I was told today, sorry, things have changed. They're on a bus, they're headed your way. I would have to start accruing comp time, holiday time, holding people over, working double shifts and so on to be able to manage it.
At the current setup.
As the current staff.
But I mean, if you went to a 10-hour shift or a 12-hour shift, your comp time and stuff would start being different, correct? So if you've got 12-hour shifts, 16 per shift, that's 64 staff. Help me get there. Why that doesn't work.
We'd be happy if any of you have suggestions on staffing. We met with the sheriff's office, met with Mr. Holmes for a significant amount of time, who set up the schedules at the jail.
Yeah.
We cannot, if we're keeping the kids out at least 12 hours, which we have to, we cannot do it on 12-hour shifts.
And that's the trick.
Yes.
So that's the one thing that in my discussions and ongoing discussion with Mr. Holmes right now, the one thing that we can't, one, we're not juvenile specialists.
That's what catches us up.
I'm not even a DOC or a corrections specialist, but the rec is what is difficult that we
Absolutely.
need to get around. But there's still some other parts of that we're struggling with as far as your staff levels and stuff like that goes. So I think continuing to work with everybody else. I don't doubt that you're going to need people. I just don't know what those. I don't know what
Sure.
those numbers, and I don't know what the optimum is for your people.
Yeah.
I don't know if
And
the
if you
optimum is
if you
giving
know of
exactly
a different
that.
staffing model, we're happy to look at any kind of staffing model. We went through
That's
a
crazy.
platoon like schedule with Mr. Holmes. We looked at. If you have any suggestions, we'd be more than welcome to them.
First and foremost, I would keep working with any correctional. I mean, we've got a couple of them over there. We've got former assistant director of DOC. We've got another director of DOC that's at our fingertips. We've got Greg Williams and William Monday. I mean, we've got a lot of correctional experience and knowledge. I think that if we could just get everybody together, and we're obviously not the only ones that are dealing with this nationwide. Are there any national ACA discussions or anything of that sort of how everybody else is handling this? Or is this just a cut and dry thing for the rest of the country? Just swallow the cost and move on.
Handling what part of it, Miles?
Every bit of it. The staffing,
Okay.
the separation, it's all of it.
Tulsa County has said we'd love to see how you do it.
Yeah, I remember that in BET, and
they're
that was
basically like, we'll see what you guys do, and we'll do what we do in the matches. So
and then as far as our juveniles and our YOs, and then our murders, this is where your knowledge and me staying out of this is detrimental to me. We're taking those people from across the state, correct? So we're kind of a regional facility. So if somebody goes off to Seminole County and does a drive-by, are they coming here, or are they
No.
doing youthful offenders down there, or juvenile, whatever they are?
They're all Oklahoma County.
We're only Oklahoma County.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. What is Cleveland County or Canadian County or any of our surrounding counties? What are they doing?
Well, I believe most of them have contracts with other counties. Under that regional type concept, I think is what you're thinking about. OJA had asked us to look at that in the past. That at one time they were proposing that we have so many beds that were just regional beds, which would call for contracts with other counties.
Yeah, it was 12 at one point.
Yeah.
And the issue there, Miles, kind of go back, was OJA, say we took 12 regional beds, all of them from Cleveland County. OJA would pay that 85% of the number. And then we would be paying, Oklahoma County would be, without a contract with Cleveland County, would be subsidizing Cleveland County's. So we got it into the contract language that we would not take regional beds unless we had a contract with the sending county, and that the Board of County Commissioners determined what that balance of that contract amount was. So you might remember from executive session when we talked about our true cost, it would be to bill the sending county for the remainder of that true cost, less the 85% paid by OJ. But right now, that's not changing in any of the discussions we've had. But one of the things that I think what we're realizing, trying to wrap my head around this staffing issue is, we've long held the position that we are subsidizing a state function. With these required changes that are coming, it is further exacerbating that divide. In our discussions with OJA that we're going to have, we sent them a contract. They sent us back their versions. We're going to have continued conversations on this YO issue, along with the other issues that we've we've talked about. Help me out. There was a slide earlier, talked about the average length of stay for a juvenile delinquent was 22 days. Are there hearing requirements on a continuing to hold those individuals?
Not for that purpose. When they're brought in, they have their first appearance hearing.
Okay.
And so if they're brought in on the weekend, that's going to be Monday at 1. If they're brought in on Monday, it'll be Tuesday at 1. But it's within 24 business hours. And that is when they establish like a preliminary hearing, all of that. And that's just regular court process. There's nothing established or required to my knowledge. It's not happening where I'm at. That is requiring judges to have a hearing just to review their status. And I mean, they can have what they call detention hearings, which they review the status, where is the case, what date are we going to have the next court hearing, that kind of thing. But they don't have hearings like what's established in this Reform Act, requiring every 30 days or more a review of their status to remain where they are.
Okay, so to your 14-year-old who's trying to impress his crush, right, that's arrested and brought in as a juvenile delinquent, once they have their preliminary hearing and it's determined that they need detention, they're there. But with the new law, as it relates to the YOs, there's a 30-day determination hearing.
Only on
Interest
murder
of
one,
justice, murder one.
not YO.
And only if they're in an adult facility.
So, right, all right.
There's not that requirement there with us.
Yeah, that's to put them into the jail. And then if I remember right, there's one that was
To keep them there,
24 hours. You had to do something. It seemed like there was 3 or 4 different things to do to put them in the jail. That they could check them once a month, or they could do it like once every 2 weeks. And then there was.
Well,
weird
the
things.
law reads that they have to have a hearing at least every 30 days. So they can have it more frequently.
Sorry, go.
Oh,
Nope.
back to the staffing matrix. I believe it's currently true, and I don't know how often it happens, but let's say you're licensed for whatever number that is, 50, including YOs, everything. You're full, you're at 50. You're presented the 51st child. You don't have the ability to turn them away, correct?
I've asked for a legal opinion from Aaron. I submitted that last week because I don't know. I didn't think we did.
If it's similar to the adult side, probably unlikely that you do, but I don't know. I'm not an attorney. So there is a mechanism in place, correct, where the judges can release in order to keep you within the number, the 50 that you're licensed for.
The mechanism would be the same process that I've initiated before when we were approaching 70, 75, going into a weekend. This has been 2-3 years ago. I would go to the judges with their cases, and our officers would review, the probation officers would review the case, the judges, the DAs, looking for, is there someone appropriate we can go ahead and release to try and get the count down. And I'm assuming we would do the same thing. It would be based on severity, public safety.
Yeah, I don't think any of us would advocate releasing somebody that's a violent offender, but
Right. I wasn't suggesting you were.
14-year-old steals a bottle of cologne and
That kind of goes to where I was. My question is, you're on slide 20. you got comparison of juvenile, youthful, and murder, one, and it's done by average stay. Out of the amount of people, you're 53 that you've got there, 13 of them I know are murder one. What's the breakdown on juvenile versus the other youthful offender? And then if they're a juvenile delinquent, what's the breakdown of charges? Are there people that, exactly to Joe's point, that we should be doing something different with and putting them inside of a cell for 22 days and teaching them to be better criminals versus teaching them to be better citizens? How many of those exist in there? And I know that's a judicial change and probably a law change. That's why I'm kind of curious, because we are coming up on crazy or legislative season
Mm-hmm.
soon. And if we're gonna, if we could do things to impact change to help you,
Mm-hmm.
help us financially, those are the things that we need to be looking at now. And I think that's what you were saying, Joe. If I'm wrong, probably not the crazy season, legislative season, but
Well, if there are things that can be done legislatively, everybody benefits, right? We benefit from a cost factor. The children that are locked up benefit because they're no longer locked up and perhaps they're getting services on the outside. So there's been and I say this out of ignorance, but there's been a lot of focus, I think you mentioned previously, on the criminal or the adult side of juvenile justice reform. But I'm not aware of as much focus on the juvenile side.
it's fine. I just texted the state director for criminal justice reform to tune in to this discussion for this very reason. And then we got Mr. Tardibono in the back from CJAC that could.
Well, not
They're
only
also-
CJAC, but I think he's on the OJA board,
Okay.
or used to be anyway.
There we go. It's also, involved in criminal justice reform, and we're obviously going to be the offender is probably not the right word, but the largest producer of these crimes and such, and probably need to do something about these individuals as well, because it seems to me we may actually be forgetting a large population that we're just turning into better criminals, and we're not correcting anybody. We're housing. I think is what the old director used to say. But
We do have two levels of diversion cases that are supervised by intake. And so when they do all of their preliminary inquiry work, their assessments, their interviews, and blah, 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 to do an informed recommendation to the assistant district attorney as to what services and what level of supervision. They can, if it's a first time nonviolent, then they can recommend the first level of diversion, and that does not even involve the court. And if they don't succeed there, then they can recommend that the DA, then it steps into the courtroom and it becomes a little bit higher level diversion with a court record, but still diversion. And then if they fail that, then they go generally to probation. So there are a couple of levels of diversion, and I think that Oklahoma County Juvenile has gotten much better at meaning prosecution, being open to looking at a case for diversion purposes. And our intake unit, they meet with the district attorney's unit at our building at least quarterly to talk about the stats. How many times did we recommend it? That you didn't approve it? Where are they at? To keep that everybody mindful and focused on, we need to do everything we can to increase appropriately diversion cases.
right, and those are great steps, and certainly commend you on that. And there's always something that, I mean, the one that I love hearing is the "I'm tough on crime." Well, I like to hear that I'm smart on crime, far more than I'm tough on crime and just want to throw somebody away and
Right.
forget about them. especially kids. So. I think so the annualized number for the 15 staff is 800.
I didn't do an annualized. That's for some of it's for 9 months, some of it's for 10 months.
So the annualized number for 15 detention officers,
680.
yeah, I've got 831, 321, 72. And your total request is the 827. Of course, that's for 9 and 10 months. I understand that. But on that total request, the iTouch fingerprinting system should be funded tomorrow. The intake specialist is also part of that, which will be funded tomorrow. The licensed mental health is what we continue to look at, and as I said in BET, the 692, 768 for the officers is what we really need to look at quickly. And I'll circle back around to the original question: how many of those can you live without? What is your bare minimum of those 15 that you can make work?
I think my bare minimum is 15. I don't make a habit of coming up here and escalating a number in the hopes that we get it down to what I can live with. I understand that money doesn't grow on trees, as my dad used to say. And so, I will continue to do the best job that I can with the resources that I'm provided.
Okay. That's fine. I didn't.
Right.
That's a question of hope. And just as we discussed in BET, I think that this is one of those things that we have funded the trust for. I have spoken with McCubbin and other members of the trust about getting this money back. They are receptive and they understand, so on and so forth. It's my personal belief that the funding, the 10 months that she's asked for the 15 officers would not be an issue from them. But that's not my concern. My concern is annualizing this for those 15 officers, because it'll be the 831 next year, and then the 3%, the 2%, and that number's just going to ratchet up slowly. So we have to be cognizant of that.
Well, that's good to hear that the trust is willing to consider giving back funds for a duty they no longer have. And I have similar concerns, especially in light of how much more it would make the separation between what the county is funding, at least in my opinion, above of the 15%. But I also, not being detention staffing matrix expert, I hear you. I understand. 15 is what you say you need, but I'm going to reach out to Brandon Holmes as well and get a little better understanding, because in my feeble brain, if you're working 14 or 16 people for 2 12-hour shifts, you have more flexibility than if you're working 14, 14, and 9, right? That's 37 people as opposed to 28, or kick it up some. So it seems to me, not living in your world, that provides you more flexibility for days off, FMLA, whatever the case may be. So I'll reach out to Brandon and try to get a better understanding of that. But I appreciate the time and all the effort that went into this. It's very helpful.
Are there any other questions?
So a motion to receive the document.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then Miles, you said tomorrow there's recommendation to fund the fingerprinting, the intake person, and
It's just
yeah.
those two, correct,
Yeah.
Cody? Because the one that the mental health there's certainly some benefit in it, but we were tracking down some other information on the mental health stuff. Jamie was to present, so
Yeah.
those are the two things
All right.
to be approved. And then, is there any other action that needs to happen? We accepted the report.
I believe she's doing the same presentation here on the budget board, so I don't know that we would have to do anything at this time.
The
Motion to
agenda
receive.
item, both today and for tomorrow, is just a presentation, and it's to begin educating and putting out there what we need and getting some guidance, some feedback, some other ideas. So only receiving the report, I think, would be all.
Motion to receive.
No, I think, she
We-
just told me we
we-
received the documents, but not the report. So
Right, yeah, motion to receive the report.
Second.
Oh, I guess we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is,
I believe now we're at item 6, discussion, review, and possible action regarding.
hold on. Mike, a little bit more about the youth residents and detention employees and how 2311 is increasing our cost and the ongoing negotiations that we are with the state. Is there any updates besides the last one?
We got back their revisions to our suggested language. I think it's been about a week or so ago. I know Aaron's looked at it, Cody's looked at it, I've glanced at it. We'll circle up our wagons internally and then try to sit down and have a discussion with them.
Because this seems certainly to exacerbate that.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
I kind of figured.
Right, again, it's the state dictating. All right.
Oh, way. All right. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, Grant, try that again. County Court Services.
All right, I just have just some stats for the month, just to provide you with. For August, releases 101, denials for the month 29, caseload 588, and other than that, I don't have anything new or additional to add for this month. Just wanted to give you those numbers for the month, and that's it.
Motion to receive report.
Second.
Aye.
Thank you, Grant.
Thanks for sticking around.
I was an aye, my mic was off. Item 7, discussion, review, and possible action, IT. Welcome to the day.
Thank you, everyone. What we're really discussing here is because of the way we've changed the way we've done our licensing structure for Microsoft 365 and Exchange Online through email, there are things that need to be discussed and we need to figure out if this needs to rise to the level of policy or not. The biggest issue is with Microsoft 365 and Exchange licensing, mailboxes are no longer free, as it were. So if we have someone who has left the county, separated service, retired, or whatever, we have to know, and we can't leave accounts open. Because if we do, we're paying for mailboxes and paying for licenses for people who are not here. Dana and I have talked to Karen and Christy, and they've agreed to help us with getting a termination report monthly. Now, for the offices that don't do HR through Karen or anybody else, we also need to be working with them to get a report that's very similar to that as well, like the district attorney's office and possibly juvenile if that's something that they can do. My question for the committee today is, does that need to rise to the level of a policy, or are we okay with doing that individually with the principals involved?
Go ahead.
I hope it does not, but should it? It would have to. Meaning, Can you work with everybody?
I think we can.
Yeah,
We've
if-
never
if-
really had too much of a
if
problem
nothing-
before, except for
if
you.
we start
Miles.
having issues, right? Right. Mine just took forever. I mean, if you start having issues that arise,
Mhm.
then
Well, the biggest worry we have is with account creation, deletion. The kind of policy that we have done internally is to basically say any account that has been unused for 60 days, we archive it, move it off. But there are some exceptions, especially for people who have been here for a very long time or have done a lot of work, that those accounts are left open so that things can, because people are used to sending emails to them and things of that nature. So we need to create a way for them to know, for someone who, say, emails, I want to pick on Dan Matthews for a minute since he's not here anymore. Since Dan retired, if somebody needs to send an email to Dan that really needs to go to Karen, I would think that the more efficient way to handle anything like that is to put a redirect or an out of office message that says, Mr. Matthews is now retired. Please direct any appropriate correspondence to Ms. Karen Kent, current director of the Human Resources Department. Have that there for 30 to 60 days and then kill the mailbox. Would be kind of how I would think would be the best way to do it.
When you guys get a request to create a new email account, are you being informed that that's for a new employee that is replacing someone or a new employee?
Not always. It's more general. We'll usually get a request that says we have a new employee. The new employee requests usually come through pretty quickly and easily. We don't always get the request for somebody's been terminated.
So as a part of that process, you get, hey, I contact you and said, Rich, I need a new email account established. Wouldn't it be simple for you guys to reply back, happy to create it? Can you tell me if this is a new position or this is replacing?
And we can. The issue with that is I think it would be more efficient if that was sent as part of the whole original.
I think so too. But okay,
but we can actually add to that, sure.
Right now, did you say you're looking at maybe a monthly report?
We think a monthly would be best because at the end of the year, you have to square your licensing up with Microsoft to make sure everything's accurate. If it's a yearly report, it would still work. We just have to scramble a little bit to make sure you have everything put together for true up.
Oh no, I think more often is better. But if that monthly number is adequate, at least we think so as of now. Payroll, every department, every elected official, I would say outside of the DA doesn't do this, but everyone else currently, in order to get paid, they do a payroll change sheet each month, and it's submitted.
I believe that's where you guys are pulling that term for us.
And Karen, you're able to pull that on a countywide basis or on just a BOCC basis?
That's what we didn't know. We didn't know if they could do everybody but the DA or just who they did HR for.
Yeah. So I think that would be a good place to start, is that payroll change.
That's where we started. The one other piece I'd like to add to this is licensing is not infinite. So if we own 500 and I think 55 licensing for Microsoft 365, that's what the licensing number is, or 1,300 Exchange Online to cover non-M365. If we hit a limit, we've hit the limit. That means we can't just continue to make. I want everybody to understand it's business impacting if we run out. While we're going to do our best to keep a cushion, unfortunately, it appears that we end up creating more accounts than disabling and deleting, so it's hard to keep that cushion, and it's always going to take time to get them if we do hit that limit. I just want everybody to understand that.
Right. So right now the limit, I'll make sure I'm understanding. The limit we're talking about is the 365, and it's 500.
And Exchange Online as well.
Exchange Online.
As well.
Okay, so everybody has migrated over to Exchange Online.
Everyone has been migrated to either an M365 license, which would be BOCC departments, plus the DA, plus election board, county clerk is in there. I know the assessor has been budgeted for M365. They just haven't made that purchase yet.
Okay.
So they'll eventually migrate over there. The rest, let's call it the rest, that'd be the jail, that would be the
Let
sheriff's
me ask
office.
this way, better maybe.
Okay.
As of now, there are no more free accounts.
I would say there's a cushion of probably, we'll say 10 or less. We just purchased another 40 more to get us through this new wave of new people
40 more.
in 365.
Okay. And I was going to suggest that we go ahead and purchase additional.
Right. And the problem with that is we run into budgetary constraints.
Right.
Okay. Right. So it's, once again, it's, as long as the money is there, it's easy enough to get a quote for 10 more, 15 more, whatever. We would never get a quote for one. I'd probably never do less than 10, just for that cushion reason. But I just want people to understand that in the past, it wasn't so business impacting.
Right.
Now it can be if we hit that cap, and now I've got to go, the process is the process. And it could take a week to get new licensing and get it in there to where we can use it.
Well, if XYZ department contacts you and says, I need an account, and you
we're
say we're out, then I think it's
Get to you as
perfectly
fast as
appropriate for you at that point in time, regardless of where we're at, waiting on that report to say,
Hey, do
have you had
we can
anybody
shut
that's
off?
left?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, here's the thing on that, Joe, just also to be clear, and we've kind of learned this as we're doing this, is if we've got people that are queued up, if you will, Microsoft does not just, if we were free up 5, but we have 10 in the queue, Microsoft will assign those 5 randomly. Microsoft does that. We don't get to say, hey, we want to prefer these 5 over these other 5. Does that make sense? Microsoft is going to say, hey, look, you've got 5 available. You got 10 in the queue. I'm going to take 5, and it's going to choose whatever 5. I don't think it's in there by who got in there first, or I don't know what the parameters that Microsoft chooses. I just want people to understand that too. It's not just a case of, I see what you're saying, and that's what we would do, but it's not a case of,
Okay.
oh, hey, you can take this person's license and assign it to this person. Not necessarily.
The
Right,
second
that's
we
helpful
unassign it,
enough.
it may
Thank
get
you.
It may get
reassigned.
if 3 other people are in the queue, it may go to one of those 3, and probably would. We just, like I said, I just want to bring this up, or we want to bring this up just so people understand and department heads understand that there are now limits to new account creations that we have to be aware of, and that it can be business impacting it. Number one, we don't stay on top of it with the help of everyone else.
Yeah, I think to Miles's point, you all tried reaching out to everyone, utilize that payroll change form, Karen's assistance. We see where we're at, and then if we have a problem,
Sure.
we,
And a lot of this is learning in progress even
It
for
is.
us.
we make a
We've learned
policy.
quite a bit on this in the last 3 weeks.
And that's really what we wanted to make sure of is, does it need to rise to that level? We don't think it does now, but we did want the committee to be aware of it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
That, and just for people to understand that if we have to tell you no for 3 or 5 days, here's why. It's not that we're just not doing it.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. That's all.
Thank you.
That's all we got.
Motion to receive report.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Hey guys, Chris had some more information on the disinfecting item.
Huh?
Chris had some more information on disinfecting item.
Motion to reopen item 2.
Second.
Motion is second to reopen agenda item 2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Chris?
First time I was up here, I was ill-informed. I apologize for that, but I've met with Keith and I've gotten more information so you guys could have a better picture. We currently have 6 people disinfecting, 1 in ICB building, 3 in the courthouse, and 2 in the annex building, at the cost of $12,000 a month. We have requested funding to pay for July, August, and September at this point. So we need a 14-day notice to the janitorial department if we're going to make any changes. And to do that, we'll need funding to continue at this level or whatever you guys decide to do.
Cody, we did the July, August, September in BET. And that's on for tomorrow, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, there's a transfer from their capital to their M&O CARES fund to cover the expenses for this particular disinfecting for the months of July, August, and September. So if there were a change that the board was wanting to make to cancel that contract, it requires 2 weeks. At this particular time, there is enough time to give notice so that we're not having to expend funds into October. If there's a delay, then there may have to be a future transfer for an October payment.
You know, on the budget board discussion tomorrow, it's just to approve the transfer. Are they going to discuss it? Is there an item to discuss it?
There should be an item to discuss it. Kelly Henley was going to put an item on there, and it's, if you recall, early on we had assigned a particular amount of money to emergency management, facilities, the sheriff, juvenile, and the money was put into certain line items, M&O and capital being the two biggest line items. Facilities has money still in there that they can spend on this, but it's just in the wrong line item. It's in capital. So there is an item to transfer the necessary funds from their capital CARES account into their M&O CARES account to be able to pay for those balances.
Cody, is there money that's in the wrong line item to go beyond September?
There's July, August, and September. My recollection is that will not exhaust all of the funds in facilities management. However, if this contract were to be contemplated to go through the end of this calendar year, there would need to be more money put into the facilities account.
Well, to be fair, yeah, through the end of this calendar year, yeah, because December 31st, without any future
Right.
extensions, that money's got to be gone anyway.
Yeah. But I think
but I don't know that.
Was it
Is there
November
enough
or
in
something
there?
like that?
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking they only had enough.
There
to
was
go to November.
56,000, I believe, and we're at 12,600, 30,
Well, that's 25,000.
36,
So maybe
40. So there's probably 1 or 2 more months, October and part of November,
Yeah.
something like
I
that.
was thinking there was 40,000 in that account after the transfer for some reason.
I think it was 56 to begin with, and then
Okay.
we'll have this 36, 37,000.
At any rate, it'll be discussed tomorrow at budget board, the funding, et cetera.
Now, there's still money in the overall CARES account, so we could transfer from
No,
emergency
I was just curious
management or
about
whatever.
Not what might be left in the overall CARES account, but what might be left in the CARES allocation to.
Yeah, they would need a supplemental amount put into their
Depending on
account to get through the calendar year.
the calendar year, but if we continued through October, we could probably, I'm not saying one way or the other whether I'm in favor of it, because personally I believe there are other things that we could do that would greatly mitigate COVID transmission beyond wiping things down, but it wouldn't necessitate us further dipping into the remainder CARES to go an additional 2 weeks or so. More than
I don't
likely,
believe so,
more
but
than likely.
we would need to do another transfer because the
Well,
agenda
right.
item tomorrow is only to transfer the
Yeah,
necessary
I get that,
funds.
but we
Yeah.
wouldn't be dipping into the CARES reserve, if you will, by having to transfer additional money into facilities. That money's there. It would just be moving it from one line item to another.
That
If
that is
they
how I
chose to
recall
go
the
that
situation.
direction. Okay.
Policy and governance, do we have the ability to make a recommendation to budget board?
I believe we do. I think we have in the past as well.
I mean, I'll make a motion to eliminate the disinfecting group.
I think that would be a recommendation.
I think there are.
VOCC because it's a VOCC contract, so it wouldn't necessarily be a recommendation.
Miles, I think we just let the budget board discuss it and determine how they want to go. Yeah.
That's fine with me. I didn't agree with you that we're kind of wasting money on the disinfecting crew. I mean, even the CDC kind of says, well, it doesn't kind of say, it definitely says transference is not what they originally thought it was. So.
6 feet distance and some other things probably.
Hope that's as clear as mud for you, Chris. Thanks for coming. Motion to receive report.
I think it's 4th down and we punted.
Yeah, right?
All right, second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Citizens' participation, seeing none. Board comments? D1? D3?
No, thank you.
Any new business to come before this body? Seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Have a nice day.